Welcome to Seeking the Truv, where we explore how successful companies and business leaders use data to make confident decisions. Hosted by Darshana Shetty, VP of Product at Truv, a one-stop solution for income and employment verification.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Seeking the Truv podcast. I'm your host, Darshana Shetty, and today with me, I have a very special guest, Dave Dickerson. Welcome, Dave.
Thanks for having me.
Dave, I'm going to give a brief introduction about you, and please correct me if I'm wrong or if you'd like to add anything more. So you're the founder and chairman at Accurate Background today. You're also a board member at Ferretly, which is an AI company which screens social media for candidates and looks
Correct.
at their profile.
Correct.
And last but my most favorite part is you've been the first few advisors for Truv back when we were a very small hot dog shop and we were called Citadel ID.
Correct. You didn't even have a product then.
We didn't even have a product then.
Right.
Tell us more. Why did you take a shot at Truv?
I met Kirill, and he proposed what you guys were the problems you guys were trying to solve, which was a big problem in our space on gaining verifications. We're looking for alternative methods. So I understood what he was trying to do, and a lot of times in the background screening space, it's better to partner with someone else in the technology side to achieve the results faster. And so I like Kirill. I like what the team was doing. So I took a leap, and I think it's been a good outcome so far.
Well, thank you for having the trust in us, and we've always learned so much from you. And thank you for taking a shot when we were such a small company. But I think the first time I met you in PBSA 3 years ago, almost. And Dave, I was really fascinated by your entrepreneurial journey, right? And how you've built a successful company like Accurate today. So maybe let's start there, right? Tell us more about your journey. Why did you end up picking background screening space? Educate us and educate the listeners.
So in 1996, I was working for a company that was a public records aggregator. So they would get public records files. They created a database, and you would use that database for skip tracing, for basically locating people, right? So with a few attributes, I could search the database and try to locate that person. And the way you would do it was cross-referencing different databases to build a social security number. And then once I had the social security number, then I can kind of get an idea of where that person was. And also I would have access to other information. So the primary users of that product at that time were banks who were looking for people who had defaulted. And the other one was private investigators. And I was working with the private investigators. And so the private investigators weren't using a lot of this product. It was a relatively inexpensive search. It was like $5, I think, at the time. And they weren't doing a lot of volume. So when I was looking to them as to other products and services we can offer, what always came up was criminal records.
Right.
And so we had a product at the time, but it was very expensive and very slow. So the more I started looking into it, I'm like, well, we could create our own network of people to go to the courthouses and get this information and provide it relatively inexpensively. So the company wasn't interested in doing that. So I had been in business for myself before, so it took me all of 10 seconds to decide, well, okay, I'm going to leave and go do it on my own. So I did that. And so initially I started out as effectively a wholesaler in the space, selling criminal records to other providers. And the way I started was just literally start calling the courts, asking at the time, is there any researcher who comes in every day? Here's my phone number. Have them call me. I may have work for them. And I started building my network. And then in some courthouses where I could access remotely, I did that as well. So, technology has really changed the space over the years, but that's how I started out. And then probably within 6 months of providing the services, I was approached by a very large retailer and said, we do about 200 or 300 of these searches every day. Your name pops up every time as the source to get this. Can we just work with you directly? And so then we just started building products for end users over that period. And, company's grown. We've been doing this for 26 years.
Awesome. I'm sure over the course of 26 years, you've had a lot of, lessons that you've learned, things that have gone right, things that have gone wrong. If you were to kind of give some advice to young entrepreneurs out there who's trying to either build a successful startup or start out with their journey as an entrepreneur, what would you say? What would you say to them?
For me, it really was listening to the clients and what their needs were, and then I would try to solve a problem. So I think Accurate still today is very good at solving customer problems, identifying them, solving them, and building solutions for that. And I think it's not so much if I'm going to advise someone, it's not so much what I want to build, or as if I'm the entrepreneur, don't get caught up in your idea as much as what the problem you're trying to solve, because it's going to evolve.
Absolutely.
What you start out today is going to be different, 2 years from now.
Yeah. And nobody wants a cool product that nobody's going to pay money for. Right?
That's right. That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
Yeah. Thank you for that. So for the purposes of our educating our listeners, right? Background screeners typically partner with employers and applicants who are trying to change jobs. They verify those applicants and make sure everything that they have stated in their application and their history on their resume, it's all correct. And also they do criminal and other additional checks. Is that an accurate description of a background screener?
Correct. A background screening company, a CRA, Consumer Reporting Agency, they're not investigators, right? We're not trying to turn over every stone to find everything about you. We're trying to verify the information from the candidate, what they have provided. Okay. So from the criminal records, we're just going to the courthouses and verifying the information there. From the employers, you're providing the employment information, and we're verifying that you actually, in fact, worked at that employer.
So if you were to kind of talk about some common challenges faced by background screening industry, what are those challenges today?
Regulation is one thing, the government, right? They keep getting involved as to what we can report. But again, we work with our customers and in the courthouse to solve that. The other problem too is on the verification space, which has been a huge problem, right? The cost has gotten more expensive to do that from the providers that are the historical legacy providers out there, right? And the data is not necessarily that good, right? So the verifications has had to evolve. And so part of evolving is you actually have to teach the customer to kind of reimagine what a verification is. Okay. So, I mean, historically you used to do, I want every employer for the last 7 years.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, sometimes it's harder to get that data. So you get the customer thinking, maybe the last employer is really the more important one, right? And then you show them data like the information that you couldn't get 7 years ago. You're not even using that data to make a decision anyway. So you're just wasting money.
Right. And how does Accurate tackle some of these challenges?
Again, we look at the solutions that are out there, right?
Yeah.
And then we partner with the different providers, and we will develop a solution that fits our customer needs, right? So, sometimes you get lucky and there's a solution out there that kind of solves the problem 100%. And other times it's like you may have to use different solutions. Maybe, one provider plus you're doing a couple internal, I don't want to say workarounds, but basically ways of getting that data.
So something like a waterfall.
Yeah, that's exactly right. You create a waterfall effect, and then you just go through that process of trying to get that information. So the one thing with background screening companies, where the innovation comes in is in aggregating the data. Okay, they're not reinventing background screenings. It's just how they are gathering the data and aggregating it, right? So we're, not just how we go to the courthouses and get the information. It's very automated now. Now we're looking for solutions to automate the verification process, right? And part of the way you achieve that is removing the what we call touches, right? So the more people who touch it, it complicates the process. It becomes more expensive, right? So if you can remove the touches, it actually makes it more efficient.
Okay.
And you get it back faster, and it's a better product all around.
Awesome. Yeah, that's helpful. And I hear a lot of things about how background screening industry is evolving, right? And it's more consolidating. So I'd love to kind of pick your brain on, how do you think the background screening industry is evolving and what will it look like in the next 5 years?
I would say it's relatively easy to enter the market, extremely difficult to scale.
Yeah.
Okay, so to give you an idea, there's probably in the US, probably 500-600 providers.
Yeah.
Okay, and most of the vast majority of these providers are very small, mom and pop regional spots, and who make a very good living providing their county area, right? But they're very limited in the services they can provide. So as you grow the business, you have to keep investing in technology. And so what ends up happening is, the larger you are, the more technology that's required to do this, right? And you have to spend the money, and not everybody wants to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, to give you an example, you have three publics in the space.
Mm-hmm.
They probably represent just over 50% of the market.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then you have Accurate, who's the largest individually owned provider. Okay, and then you probably have from there it just drops even further. There are probably three more providers.
Mm-hmm.
So you are going to see a consolidation in the space over time.
And if you were to think about key factors or critical for background screeners, right? What are some solutions out there or some factors that background screeners currently use? What are some things to keep in mind while evaluating different solutions, different options, different vendors? How do you think about choosing a good solution for the space or many solutions for the space?
Right. Again, a lot of it depends from the customer standpoint. A lot of it depends on the customer size. Okay. Yeah. The larger the customer, mm-hmm. what's going to end up happening is you want to select a provider who actually owns their own technology. Mm-hmm. So you can customize it, you can integrate it, you can kind of make adjustments that's needed to meet your needs, right? The smaller providers tend to be on third-party platforms. They're very limited as to what they can do. So the larger you get, again, this is where scale becomes important. Mm-hmm. So, when you own your own technology, you can integrate with different ATS platforms, different HRS platforms. You can build solutions, again, using Truv, right? That's for the verification. I can use Truv as to building a verification product. Mm-hmm. Okay. Those are things that we can control, right? When I'm not relying on someone else to do that. And I think for the customer standpoint, that's really important because the larger the customer, they're going to have their own requirements as to how they want the background to work, how they want the workflow to process. And those are things where, again, the larger you are, it makes it a little bit easier. Mm-hmm. So
got it.
And then the other thing where I think, again, a little plug for Accurate, I think customer service standpoint is a really big part of it, right? Once you get past the technology, we are a service-based business, so I think that's important. And so we want to work with, you want to find a CRA that is very customer-focused, and we want to work with partners that are customer-focused as well.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Makes sense. So speaking of Truv, right? As a head of product at Truv, I've always kind of it's kept me at night at days where I've thought about how is our product differentiated, right? It's a very competitive space. We have a lot of players. So I'd love to hear from you. You're a client, you're an advisor. How do you perceive the value of Truv and the solution that we offer?
What I like about Truv is you again involving the candidate. One of the things that we did early on, going back to 2000, we started a candidate entry process where we would actually collect the data directly from the candidate. So working with Truv, it follows the same kind of process and logic, right? So the candidates involving themselves, they're providing certain information, so it's easier to get their data. Okay, so once you have the candidate captured in that onboarding process, it's easier to collect the information at that time. The last thing we want to do as a CRA is have to go back to the candidate mm-hmm. For updates, 2 or 3 days later, where the more we can get up front, the better. And I think Truv kind of meets that need, especially if you're looking for the most recent employer. Mm-hmm. That's where the sweet spot, in my mind, that's the sweet spot for Truv.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And if it's like, previous employer, or if there is a specific background screener that wants to collect 7 years of employment history, right? What are some of the other solutions that you lean on?
So the other solutions that are out there, right? You can go back to a company that we all know is the Equifax, the work number, right? The problem with that, it's extremely expensive. They've doubled their prices every year, and you only get information back probably less than 30% of the time. Mm-hmm. If you're in the banking industry, it's probably a good solution. But if you're outside the banking industry, the times you're going to get information is kind of rare. Mm-hmm. And the other problem is they're charging you for data that if they return something that they had in their system 10 years ago, you still get charged. Or even if the customer doesn't want that data, right? So that's a problem. We have to educate our customers. Some customers say, it is what it is. I'm willing to pay it, but most of them are looking for alternatives, right? So the alternatives are, we will again reach out to the company through a phone call, right? Yeah. The second way is doing some type of documentation collection, either through a recent pay stub, or you're doing like a W-2, right? Mm-hmm. And again, at the time you're collecting the data, this is where I think working with Truv has been extremely important. Is if Truv doesn't have it within their network, we know at that time we might as well just collect the data up front.
Right.
Okay. And so we can save the phone calls or reaching out. Because when you're doing verifications, if you really don't get that person on the first phone call, the success rate really drops.
Interesting.
If they haven't got back to you by the third day, they're probably not going to get back to you.
Yeah.
Okay. So the more you can get it up front, this is the better.
It's better. Got it. And in terms of calling the employer and documentation upload, what kind of, give me a ballpark range of what type of success rates do you see there?
On the employer, we'll probably see 50% of the time we'll catch them on the first call. Okay. But if you don't catch them on the first call, it just really drops.
It's gone. Okay.
It's gone because most of the time they're not necessarily interested in providing data to something for somebody who worked there 8 years ago.
Right. That's right.
Okay. And they don't want to have to do the work, right? That's the problem, right?
Yeah.
So again, this is where the documentation collection becomes important. And these are things that we work with our clients, the customer, to kind of figure out ahead of time. So when we're configuring them up front and saying, this is our process, how do you want to work, right? You have some customers say, I don't care. I want you to call every day for 5 days. Even though the success rate is not going to be there, right?
Right.
Those customers are rare, but those are things you have to work out. Or some will say, I understand that you're working with Truv. This is great. Everyone else, just collect the documents up front.
Dave, you spoke about instant databases, and sometimes, you may not get the accurate data, right? It might be outdated. How do you combat that? What do you do to kind of make sure that you don't have such data going into the system?
Again, we're reaching out to the candidate, okay? And if we can't obtain the information from the employer, the previous employer, the candidate will provide their last pay stub at that job or the W-2 for that year that shows the employment. Mm-hmm. Okay. Again, and that's where we're going to provide back to the candidate to our client. Mm-hmm. Okay. So, it's basically we're relying on the candidate to provide us that information.
And in terms of true versus instant database versus document upload or collection, or even reaching out, reaching out to the HR or the employer, right? Where do you see the most value? And in terms of benefits and investment ROI, where do you see is the most value? And which is quicker, which is easier, which is safer, which is faster? What is your opinion?
Okay, in my opinion, if you already have the candidate in the process, Truv is the most cost effective.
Yeah.
Because as long as they're providing the information, I'm going to get that information back from the payroll system.
Right.
Okay, so it's an accurate.
It's the source.
Yeah, the source. You're going directly to the source. The information is accurate, right?
Correct. Yeah.
So every step beyond that gets more expensive. So phone calls through a call center becomes more expensive. The problem is if you go to these databases, right? Mm-hmm. They become more expensive, right? And so you have the work number, who notoriously very high price. Okay. Mm-hmm. But the success rate is only about 30% of the time, which is actually consistent. If you look at the employment data, Fortune 1000 only employs about 35% of the people.
Yeah.
All right. So that means, 65% of the people are employed by small businesses or are not being addressed by Truv.
That's right.
So how are you going to get that data? Okay. So you have to be able to go out and get that data directly from the employer. Okay. And again, I'm either going to call or I'm going to collect that data from, if I haven't got it from Truv, I'm either going to call or we're going to collect that data through some type of documentation.
Got it. And with documentation, you rely on consumer making sure that, there could be fraud there. They could go generate an online pay stub or an online W-2 for
Correct.
$8.
That's always a risk. Right. That's exactly right. That's always a risk. I think we do a good job of trying to vet those things out, but that is always the risk. And we take the approach that candidates are going to be good actors in the whole process, right? They really want the job, so that's why they're providing you information.
Right.
You do have those rare instances that someone will go above and beyond, and start fabricating documents. But I think we're pretty good about vetting those things out.
Yeah. Awesome. Cool. That's great to hear. My last question, and we'll wrap up after this. Interest rates have been at an all-time high, right? And we've seen kind of the economy and the market changing rapidly over the past year. And a lot of companies have let go of a lot of their employees, right? So given the current economic conditions, how does this impact background screening industry today? And what are some of the risks to keep in mind?
Again, so background screening, you always want to make sure that the employees you're hiring are the right employees for your company, right? It's just a lot of times it's a cultural fit, right?
Yeah.
As far as the impact to our industry, what you have to address is what customers are you have as your client base, right? So if you tend to be more in, like right now, technology, you're probably being hurt. Okay, that you're probably feeling the market. But if you're in last mile delivery, any type of transportation, hospitality, healthcare, those are the things that right now you're probably okay. Healthcare is always going to be a good vertical to be in. Any type of last mile delivery is always going to be a good vertical to be in.
Yep.
And you're going to feel that. During the pandemic, Accurate was actually, I think, the only company in our space that actually grew.
Interesting.
And just because of the clients that we had. Yeah. So a lot of the companies were down. They ended up down about 10% on average across the board. We actually grew 10% in that year.
Okay. And do you see a lot of candidates like applicants, moonlighting? Is that a very common scenario?
Yeah, especially for your guys' generation, multiple jobs doing. Yeah, that's a lot of them are picking up these in the gig economy. They're picking up other opportunities that they can make money.
Perfect. And what are some strategies to combat these risks? If you were to give like all the background screening companies words of wisdom, what are some strategies to keep in mind? What do background screeners need to do more of?
Well, again, I think the part that gets missed in our space, we're a technology company, but we're tech-enabled service.
Right.
And I think a lot of people don't focus on the service part of it. The technology, it's going to get figured out. Okay. So once you get the technology dialed in, the information can get processed, but it becomes a service standpoint. And like we view customers as not only are the clients our customers, right? But the candidates, even though they're not paying for the background check, they're our customers equally, right? And we want to make sure that they're taken care of and their rights are being protected and we're reporting things correctly on their behalf.
That's right. Yeah. And I heard this from you, Dave, a long time ago, that there are many Daves in Accurate. Is that still the case?
Yeah.
Are there still 3 or 4 days?
I'm the original Dave. Yeah. And I think there's probably like 4 or 5 days in the senior management and board. So yeah.
Yeah, it was always like a funny, like it stuck with me that there are so many Daves at Accurate.
Yeah, it's a lot of Daves there.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Dave. Thanks for joining us today. It was really, really pleasure talking to you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Seeking the Truv. You can keep up with the latest on our podcast at truv.com/podcast or wherever you get your pods. We'll see you next time.